Hey everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres, and lately I have been making a lot of chains. I'm getting ready for an event in a month or so, and people there like chains. So I make my own. Now I can certainly buy them, but we're talking about large chains. So to have chains like this for sale, the only economical way to do it is to make your own chains. So probably the most popular style I make is this twisted style. I make a ton of them. I make them in brass, and I make them in nickel silver. Now, the only difference between these two is the size of the rings that I used to make them with. When I make chains, I'm using rings. Just like this. And I make my own. And the reason I make my own is because I haven't found anyone who sells high quality rings like this at an affordable price anywhere. Now, I've had people tell me, oh, go to the Ring King, go to this, go to that, go to the other thing. The Ring King is in Canada, so there's always the issue with import taxes and stuff like that. But beyond that, at least the last time I checked, they weren't making them out of 12 gauge wire in sizes that were bigger. So I make my own. A lot of people make way lighter, more delicate jewelry that has like little chains and bracelets and stuff like that. They make great earrings. And there's just a lot of really basic stuff that goes into making them anytime you're using links. The biggest trick, which is something that everyone who ever has worn a piece of jewelry or has a family member who has worn a piece of jewelry needs to know, is that if you have a ring, let's say here's a ring, I will open it the wrong way. So I have a ring and it's opened up somehow, okay? You can see it's got a big gap in there. And it's meaning that my necklace or my bracelet or my anklet or whatever is falling apart. When you go to close a ring, and I may need to do a drawing on this one because it's a hard thing to show. I'll show it this way and hopefully Henry can zoom in on it a little bit. In order to close this ring, I am not going to try and push it together. So I'm not going to try and take a letter C and make it into an O. I'm going to take a letter C and I'm going to push these pieces past one another, squish it as much as I need to, and bring it back until those ends line up perfectly. That is the biggest mistake I see people make. And you can watch my wrists, I'm going to simply twist. And now those two pieces line up perfectly. And I can wiggle it back and forth like that, and I get a very nice, tight, closed ring. That's the biggest mistake I see people do all the time. They're trying to take a letter C and turn it into a letter O. And you can do that, but you have to squish it and turn the pieces past one another like that, and then bring those two pieces together again so that they line up correctly. The designs here that I'm using, there's basically 3 designs that I make, and I've got an example of 2 of them. This one is 2 links in 2 links and 2 links and 2 links and 2 links. And you can vary this design by changing the color of the links. You can change the design by changing the size of the links. So for instance, I could have these large links which are about 1/2 inch in diameter, and then I could go to a smaller link that is maybe 3/8 of an inch in diameter. so that the rings are going to go like that, and then like that, and then like that, and then like that, but the ones in between will be smaller. And it simply creates a different impression. This one is also, like I said, 2 links in 2 links. I could do 2 links in 1 link. And these are all designs that were commonly used and readily available pre-1600s in Europe. And that's why I make them, because those are the people I cater to. I'm going to give a couple of quick hints on how I set up my stuff for doing. I don't normally work on my dining room table. I normally work on a tray table while I'm watching television. That way I don't have to worry about scratching the table. But I take 2 flat nose pliers like that, and I twist, and that opens the link. And I will get, because I'm going to be doing not just 1 link, I'm going to be doing a bunch of links. I'll do a bunch of these in a row. Usually I do about a dozen. And then I take other ones and I close them. So I do it as showed before, where I close the ends until it's a perfect closed link. And I do the same thing with those in terms of quantity. So I would normally make about a dozen of them. In this case, I need to have an even quantity because I'm using them for something that uses even numbers on that. Now, I've already got this started, obviously. But to continue it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these open links. I'm going to put it into the 2 links at the end, hold it with one hand, take 2 closed links, put them on to the open link, and then close the open link. And what this has done is create 2 new sections of link. Now, I'll usually do a couple of these in a row. So I just, again, threaded that through the 2 links at the end, took 2 closed links, hooked those on, and I'm twisting, twisting, twisting. Remember, I'm not pushing in, I'm twisting until I get those ends lined up perfectly. And once these have been polished, it's actually hard to find those gaps, because there shouldn't be much of a gap there at all. It should be absolutely minuscule, less than a human hair, if your links were cut right in the first place. And I will be readjusting them and fussing with them until I get them exactly the way I want them. Once I've done that a couple times in a row, I will go take one of these other open links, because remember, this is a 2 and 2 pattern. So 2 links into 2 links. So I will go back and I will thread this through so that I now have 2 links next to one another in this section of the chain. Now, these chains do not get soldered. This is extremely sturdy metal. This is 12 gauge, which means it's about 1/8 of an inch in diameter. So it's more than sturdy enough for most jewelry uses. This is heavy enough for a belt. I wouldn't hang a 25-pound something or another off my belt, but then I don't want to hang a 25-pound something or another off any belt I'm wearing unless it's a cargo belt of some sort. These are designed to be decorative. You can hang some bits and pieces off of them, bells, things like that, but they are not designed to be major weight-bearing items. Nonetheless, they are extremely sturdy, and honestly, I have never had anyone bring me something that had a problem with it. I have repaired other people's work, where the wire was a little too soft that was used. I'm not sure why it was soft, because usually the process of creating rings actually hardens it quite a bit. What I just did there was I did the same thing I had done before. I took an open one and I put it into these, and I put it into the previous one, and now I'm going to have 2 links in that chain. I'm just continuing the pattern. And what's wonderful about this, it's sort of like knitting something simple or crocheting something simple or weaving something simple. You can do this with using about 3 synapses while you're watching television. But then when it's done, it's all nice, 2 and 2 and 2 and 2 and 2. And you just have to make sure you go back and check to make sure you haven't missed any. It can happen, but that's why you do multiple passes with QA, so that you can make sure that everything's lined up correctly. You'll go back and you'll spot one, and you'll say, oh, I could line that up a teeny bit better. And you'll get the pliers and you'll tweak it just a little bit until it lines up perfectly. And that's all there is to this. Now, a critical thing when you're using rings to do this sort of thing, if you're doing a smaller scale thing, you can purchase the rings, and a lot of people do. And the advantage to purchasing the rings is you don't have to make them, obviously. The biggest disadvantage is if you're going to be using large quantities of them, it can get expensive. Another advantage to getting them is you can get other unusual metals. For instance, you can get anodized aluminums and other colored things like that. So you could have a multicolor spiral like this that you could just, where you alternate colors around, 2, 2, 2, 2, and have colors literally spiraling down, things like that. You could alternate colors in here. So you'd had, it's Christmas time, red, green, red, green, red, green, that sort of thing. These sort of metal links are available in just about any color you can think of that you can anodize aluminum in. I'm trying to think if I've seen them in anything fancier than that, like a niobium or something. I don't know. It's possible they're available. I'm always looking for larger scale rings, so I don't spend a huge amount of time with the colored things. I'm also not using colored things because they wouldn't have had colored things like that in pre-1600s Europe. So my focus is on that time frame, so that's what I'm looking for when I'm searching for things. I had hoped years ago to be able to not have to make my own rings, because it's just another process. On the other hand, I can make a pound of rings for, well, it depends on the metal, say $30, $35, and that's a good price for a pound of rings, because a pound of rings is a lot of rings. A pound of rings would probably be up to about here on this container, so that's a lot of rings. And it would probably make, oh geez, I want to say maybe 5 or 6 of these. So yeah, it's a lot of rings. It's a lot of rings. Now, what's cool about these simple chains like this, where you have 2 and 2 or 1 and 2, is that you can decide that if somebody wants a really short one, you can create a short one and use it as a choker like that. So if somebody wants to have a simple medallion that they hang from around their neck, you can put a clasp on the ends of a short piece and have it as a short choker. Trying to think if I've ever done that. I always offer that as a service, but most people are not looking for that. They're using, in the group that I'm with, are usually looking for something that they can throw over their head and don't have to fiddle around with latches and stuff. But it's not hard to do that. And especially if you're making the more delicate chains with some tiny little pendant on it or something like that, it's perfect. And if you're doing arts and crafts type fairs, that's the kind of thing that you would be most likely to be doing shorter things that have, something hanging off them. Now, you could also certainly do long ones. I own a couple of longer chains myself, and it depends on your clientele. You have to know what they like. But that's the advantage of simple patterns like this. You can easily put a clasp on them, just a hook and eye, or a toggle with a circle that fits through to, clasp the back, or some sort of a lobster clasp that hangs on to the loops. Very easy to add that. Now, when you're doing the spiral, you can't do that. The spiral has to be made as a continuous loop. It relies on the tension in the chain to keep that spiral in place. I actually don't have one in construction right now, so I'll make one. Okay, again, I'm going to start with one closed link, and I'm going to make a bunch of open links. This has to be done differently. It depends on the style of chain that you're making as to whether you need a whole bunch of closed ones or a whole bunch of open ones. That's one of those things you have to figure out yourself. There are websites online. I have not looked at any in years because I have what I need, basically. There is another type of chain. It didn't feel right. No, yep, I could feel this opened wrong. I'm going to keep twisting and I'll show you what happened. There's actually an additional slit in this that makes that link break. I could feel the difference in the tension when I went to open it. And you never ignore something like that because it means there's a problem. Anyway, back to links. There is another type of chain called a Byzantine chain that is very popular in some circles. And I have had multiple people ask me if I have ever been able to find documentation for it for the use in Europe pre-1600. And the answer is no. I have, however, found documentation for it in Japan. Japan, when it comes to things made out of chain links, should be famous for the elaborate nature of its patterns.